welcome to Timberborn and the settlement of the Skyborn. My name is Zedek, and I'm playing this game a little bit differently. You see, I'm taking this peaceful colony builder and instead trying to build a vertical skyscraper city. And we are well on our way to doing that. You can see we've got our giant power plant, these vertical farms, and massive amounts of storage I've been adding. But we are not done yet. For this episode, what is really on my mind is water. You see, we've got a lot of job vacancies, and I'd like to start boosting up the population to fill those in. The problem is we don't have enough water pumping going in, so I really can't boost that population until I have more water collected. Additionally, I've been really eyeing building kind of the centerpiece of this colony, our main water tower in the center of the map. So I'd like to try to solve both problems at the same time. Start building that tower and maybe seeing about pumping water from it so we can boost our population. That said, let's start with a peek at our aqueduct. Now, if you're not familiar with this map, I'm playing the ancient Waterways map, and it featured this originally broken down aqueduct that I've slowly been repairing throughout this episode. And at this point, it's mostly functional. One of the tricky parts with it, though, is that it has water sources in the very, very middle, as well as all the way over here. So we have to contend with bad water polluting it. Last episode, I spent a lot of time trying to get this bad water diverted through a secret underground pipe that could direct all that bad water off the map when a bad tide hit. And I didn't quite finish it. You see, when a bad tide does hit, it can also overflow here. So my intent is I'd like to seal this off, that this is a sealed chamber that bad water can't get out of. That way I can then start filling in parts of this aqueduct in with water. And once I solve that, that's also playing into our big water tower, because I would like to build a giant water tower with this nexus as the center point for the tower. So we have a giant tower in the middle of the map. So in order to accomplish this, I need to somehow seal this off. And I could do interesting things with overhangs and whatnot, but it becomes tricky because you can see the overhangs would have a gap there and have water leaking. I think this is another case for 3D dirt. So I'm sorry, beavers, this also happens to be kind of a freeway nexus, but we'll solve that in a second. And you can see something like that allows us to build a nice overhang that would seal it off entirely. And on the other side here, we can also probably rush in another set of sluice gates. I'm going to keep these ones closed for now. The intent is just, though, that that's going to let me get water out of there in the future. Now, this dirt does look a little bit ugly when it's just kind of stamped on top of the center of our aqueduct here. The good news is you're not going to be able to see this when we're done, because this is going to be inside the actual tower. While we're here, though, we should also start fixing up some of this temporary roads that I had when the aqueduct was being built. The idea is that eventually this is going to be filled with water, so I can't have all this stuff right at the bottom. And of course, we're going to need to have impermeable floors through all of this. I've been meaning to do some of this stuff for a while, it's just other higher priority work came up for the colony. And I forgot how much of a mess I added here and there for this setup. At some point, I'm going to have to really come back through here and just tidy everything up. As I'm working on this, you'll also notice I'm taking all of the tube-way stations and I'm putting it on the top of the aqueduct instead of inside. A couple of reasons for that. One, eventually I'm going to seal up this aqueduct so it's like a pipe. That way I can transfer water anywhere in the map and potentially push it up to the top of the level again. The other reason is I actually like seeing the tubeways present. Because I'm going for that bustling city feel, and you get to see the beavers as they quickly travel through, I actually want the tubeways visible so that you can see all the traffic as it flows throughout the city. All that taken care of, though, we should be able to now open all these sluice gates on the side. I just need to configure them not to let out contaminated water, and we start to get water going through the aqueduct. Unfortunately, this is not going to help a whole lot, because as soon as the dry season hits, this is only one level height of water, and that's going to quickly evaporate away. And that really brings me to the next stage of this. In order for an aqueduct like this to make any sense, we need a continuous supply of water above it to keep it populated. Especially if I'm going to use this as a pipe to say, get water all the way over here and bring it to the top of the map. Oops, I've got a leak here. I put these at the end to prevent water from flooding off, but I never actually configured them. Let's close that. Basically just doused water on their campfire. Anyways, as I was saying, what I want to do is then build something high. And that comes back to the original plan I was mentioning at the beginning of this episode, building a giant tower. My idea is that I want to build a tower here, And this is going to eventually replace this giant aqueduct over here. The first step of that is going to be to clear out all the space down here so that we have space to work with. This is also highlighting a mistake that I've got so far. I don't have any trees with pines. We've got enough stockpiled right now that I don't need to care about it, but in the future I should probably plant some pine trees over in our giant forest. Now it's time to plan the interior of this thing. Now, my original plan when I came up with this design was that I should be able to connect each of these corners here, and this would make the foundation for the new building. Something like that. Unfortunately, that also means I'm probably going to have to fill in some of this water here, which I've been set up as temporary pumping stations. Well, unfortunately, that means I'm going to also have to delete some of this stuff over here. I'm not a fan of that because we are short on water, but we'll make do. So if you can imagine that that's the base of our tower, we can slowly taper that as we go up, up, up to the top of the map. Because I really don't want this just to be one like monolith going up. We should find ways to taper it here and there or add variety of some sort. I'm also noticing with this construction, we're going to run into a little bit of a problem here with all these places not being connected with water. At least for now, to keep things irrigated, I think I'm going to have to extend some of this river here to keep these connected. And for now, I'm going to plan on this going all the way up to the height of the aqueduct. I know that doesn't bias anything for the aqueduct itself, but this is going to be the foundation for the tower, and I can figure out what I'm going to do from there. Finally, I need some way for these beavers to actually build any of this, because I don't really have access points up here. To speed this up, I'm going to opt for some two-way cranes. Kind of clunky to start with, but let's go with it. And this is where that tree farm that I created a couple episodes is really going to come in handy. You can see we've had this operational for quite some time, and so I have 17,000 logs in here. So we can afford a ton of levees to start building crazy construction like this. The first set of levees put in retrospect, there is a change I would like to make. Let's say that I fill this with water. I have no way of getting this water out, and so this water that I would collect in here is ultimately useless. What I really should have done is put sluice gates at the very, very bottom of this so that I could let water into the river system. Given that mistake, what I'm going to do is run back through here and lower all of this by one layer. I'm imagining in the future, this border of the building might end up being a boulevard or a road or something. So in here, I think this would be a good opportunity for me to dump the water out. The dynamite taken care of though, we can replace those sluice gates down at the bottom and then go ahead and stack everything up. And we can go ahead and clean up all those temporary cranes. I have a feeling we're going to need more of these cranes as time goes on, so the optimal strategy would probably be to build cranes to the top of the map and then use them to build the rest of the structure. We'll see. I want to plan out a little bit more before we get there though. The next problem I want to solve though is how to get transit in and out of this tower as we go up. So as I said earlier, this tower is going to be under pressure. And if I just take tubes all the way through there, I'm going to have a hole in the water tower. Two approaches I could take for that. The first is I could just lean into it and make a structure in the interior of this building that the tubeways run through. And so you could look through the building from either end to see through to the other end. That's a pretty interesting play. I don't mind that one. The other one is that I could just have the tubeway system duck into the pipe in and out when it goes through the wall. And that's enough if I put impermeable floors on top of this platform that it's not going to leak. And then I'd probably also have to put sluice gates right here. So that's probably the most compact of them. The building wouldn't be hollow, but it would be all sealed off from leaking. I like that approach compared to just building the tower up higher. So in practice, let's see how that's going to play out for this part right here. So let's imagine that this is the wall right here. I would need to get this tubeway into the pipe through here, then up and out the other side. And then I need to make sure when that pipe goes down, it gets sealed, and then we can go ahead and reconnect the tubeways. The next part that needs to be in play here is that this part of the tubeway needs to be sealed off, because if this is going up and there's no outlet, And there's two ways I could do that. One is I could just run impermeable floors all the way down the length of the pipe, which I will do at some point. It's just not quite ready yet. So in the meantime, I'll do this. I'll put 2 sluice gates regulating the flow out. And I'm going to be a little tricky here. I might have other water storage elsewhere in the map later. And so I do want the option for this water to flow bidirectionally, but for me to have control over it to not leak. So I'm going to put a pipeway in either direction. I probably am not going to need it, but while I'm here, I don't want to have to come here later and tear all this stuff out. There we go. So I'm going to just go to each of the sides of the tower and repeat this process. To speed up this construction, I'm going to invest in that crane I was mentioning earlier. It's just getting too tricky to build access points to everything. And this crane should probably last us until we get to the upper stories of this construction. Because once we're up there, like the crane itself will be in the way, so I will have to resort back to using stairway access and whatever. But until then, I can just forget about getting beavers to the construction site. And as I'm finishing designing this crane, I noticed that we're almost to the end of this drought. I think is good, because that means we could potentially switch over to using our tower for our water supply and tear out this temporary dam. The only thing that's stopping us is finishing off a few of these blocks here and there, and then maybe making an overflow point for this tower. So that said, let's get this crane built, let's get those final pieces in, and we'll do just that. Now, the only thing that's stopping it from being filled up is no water being pulled into the side. We can solve that very easily just by introducing some waterfalls here. I think given the amount of flow that goes through this, 3 should do the trick. With that, we should start getting the center tower starting to fill up. There we go. That gives the base of our tower a bunch of water. Point, we can continue to build up, and we can also start thinking about destroying our old dam. For the time being, though, this does double our supply of water. What I might do is continue to build this tower a little bit higher, and then after that, we can decommission this to get the space back. So let's continue building this structure. I think we can at least plan on building at the rest of this corner here. And ideally, I think I'm going to start tapering it now. But I'm running into a complication with this last bit here. Ultimately, I want this aqueduct to be continued over here. But right now, this aqueduct is built into the structure of the dam. And if I continue building up, I'm going to build myself into a corner where I have to tear everything out to rebuild the aqueduct. So I think I'm going to have to partially decommission this dam by at least a layer or two, just so I can rebuild a proper stretch of the aqueduct for this part of the dam. So let's clear some space. I want to see exactly what it is I'm doing here. So if we look over on our other runs, we can see that this is supposed to be a 4x1 overhang coming out of the structure, with the overhang built into the actual building. And I'm guessing over here, we've only got a 2x1. So we need to get down to this layer and replace it, which unfortunately is going to mean breaking some of this building down. We're going to get some temporary flooding as we dump all this water out. Yep, lots of flooding, lots of disruption, but that should get us down to the layer that we need. So yes, this is the segment right here. I need to replace all of these with 4x1s. So if that is there, that means that we could just plan on continuing the rest of the aqueduct. In fact, I think we might as well build out the next run of this aqueduct anyways to sit on top of this dam. And I can just add a couple of regular dams to access spillways at the end here. This just looks like a giant mess, but we should get it working. Also, how did you get here? Oh, another case where a beaver must have been stuck in the pipes. Well, let's see. I do want beavers to have some access to the interior of this building. Maybe given that this guy is stranded, it's a good excuse to do that. I could just add a two-way station right in here. That should let him escape and give us access to all these supplies. All right, this absolute destruction that I caused is starting to look a little bit better. Just going to continue with slowly draining that out, and we should be in good shape. With that solved, though, we can get back to designing the main tower. Now, this one is tricky. I'm not actually sure what I'm going to go for here. A couple ideas I had, though, is I'm thinking of narrowing as it gets up higher, and I was thinking of trying to mix in dirt into some of the structure to have terraces in different areas. The idea is that maybe I could then plant gardens or other plants on top of the building as it goes up. I have to keep the top of the map in mind because up here, that's as high as I can go. So that gives me the distance I've got as I taper it up. So I'm just really gonna tinker with this. I'm not sure what I'm gonna end up with. You know, in a lot of the buildings that I do, I go in with like a rough plan, and I don't know exactly how it's gonna shape up in the end. There's a lot of different ways I could go with this build, and sometimes I just kind of experiment. I know the broad strokes, but as I get building it, I find something else that I want to do or a slight tweak, and that is definitely the case that's going on here too. So with this all the way around, I think that should make a nice ring that I could then increase the building going up. So now we can start tapering it up another run. The only thing I'm not a big fan of is that I don't really have any space for a lot of decorations on the edge here. Like, this would look really cool if I had some way to put monuments ringing their edge, like gargoyles or something. You know, I wonder if I could pull something off. When I build structures like this, it's really difficult to do that with overhangs, because overhangs, again, leak through the bottom. But this could be a case, again, where 3D dirt works well. I just don't know if it will look odd, but with 3D dirt, I can pull this off. No problem. And then that's wide enough that I could put monuments on the edge. Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, you will see the dirt, but that's okay. You can't see that it's dead dirt because it's not irrigated. Now, I'll only be able to do this for a bit because remember, once dirt gets too high off the ground, I'm not allowed to build it anymore. So I can use this technique for the lower layers of the tower, but once we get higher, it's not going to work. That works. I like the look of that. The other thing I might do is add some texture to this building. So let's say that we're going to continue this up until the next height. And then maybe the next time I taper, I'm going to make those terrace gardens that I was talking about. It looks a little bit boring when it's just a flat wall like this. Something I did in my last season is I added decorations to this flat levees by using sluice gates just interspersed into the structure. I bet I could do something here. I'll just set them to closed, probably make this look more just not like a giant flat surface. Maybe something like that. Yeah, you can see I know the scaffolding's in the way, but you can see the effect here. Other than me not making this perfectly symmetrical, which I can fix, this does look like a better surface than that. So I'm just going to replicate that pattern on each of the sides here. We have enough metal blocks that it's okay to decorate this way. The only thing is I'm going to have to remember to go back and visit each and every one of these and mark them as closed, because I don't want them actually draining my dam. They're all just there for decoration. That's the next floor going in. Now, I'm figuring we've got maybe 2 additional stories or 2 additional layers here that we can mess around with. For the next layer, I want to do something different. I'm thinking it could be almost like an atrium up here with gardens or the dirt that I was mentioning earlier. And then after that, I can put another cover on it, which is the final crown that goes all the way up to the top. So I'm thinking that this layer in here is going to be filled with dirt, and it's going to have the ring of the levees around it. But unfortunately, that's too far for dirt to hang off on its own. So I think I'm going to have to build some sort of cover in here. If I could build support beams here, that would get one side, and support beams here would cover this side. I would just need some structure to cover the interior. Yes, as I'm looking at this, this looks very doable. That just seals everything off, and we've got this nice lip here to put dirt. So if I place dirt all the way through here, all I need to do is delete dirt blocks wherever I want water to be able to continue flowing upward. So if this center column is exposed, that should be fine, I think. What that's going to do is, one, as long as this center column touches dirt, it should keep all of this irrigated, and I can keep this going up. So let's say I'll do this amount. If I make it too narrow, I'm worried that it's going to reduce the irrigation range. So really what I want is a 3x3, but it's not going to be symmetrical. It's not going to be centered. So I don't like that. But what I could do then is structure this like that. And then we could come up with some other pillars over here to continue it, and then come up with some roof. So if we say that, for example, the building is going to continue to narrow, I'm thinking something like this. These parts right here could start to fold in. This part in the middle could continue to go up, and then we can just create some sort of roof to connect them. And then that gives us the option over here. We can somehow get beavers up here and then maybe plant trees or something, which is actually a really good point. Before I continue going any farther here, that's a problem with this design I've got. There's no way to get people up here. And I do have all this tubeway into the interior of this building already. I wonder if there's a good opportunity just to bring this pipeway up here and connect it. Yes, I think there is. In fact, given the way this is shaping up, I don't need this in the middle. That was kind of unnecessary. And if I'm getting rid of that, the center of this column is perfectly free to be replaced with a tubeway that goes all the way up. And then once this tube is here, I think I can easily have a branch that goes off to the side and then maybe goes underneath the dirt. Yeah, just like this. So that can go underneath the dirt. We can then rebuild this wall, and then we can, as long as this is sealed with impermeable floors, so now we've got a station access. That works perfectly. I have to really think of what I'm going to use this for. This would be an interesting place to put, additional monuments, or maybe some of our well-being stuff up here. It's not quite enough for some stuff, but actually, maybe I could put mud baths or something. That points out something I'm missing in this design. I have tubeways in here, but I don't have any gears. Huh. Oh, that is an oversight on my part. Gears, once I've got them in here, I can route them around, very similar to what I'm doing here. I've got a solution for this. I'm not going to connect it to power yet, but I'm going to put the power inside the building. So you see this aqueduct here and the way we routed this tubeway? This gear shaft is going to go all the way through here, and I'm going to do the same up and over technique that I did with our tubeway station. Like that. And eventually this is going to be sealed off, so you won't be able to see it. And it can work its way somehow, I don't know, some way, somehow, it's going to work its way to the power plant. We can figure that out later. If I've got this layout working the way I expect it to, that should get power now inside here, and we can work that same power all the way over to the center of the building. There we go. That should give us power all the way to the roof here. And I'm just going to make sure that I continue to carry it up to the top. Now, continuing up, I'm met with a bit of a challenge. I need to make some covering here that's deep enough to cover these trees. But there's a couple of different ways that I could go about doing this. And I've tried a few to see which one looks the nicest. And I'm leaning towards probably the simpler one. Sometimes the simplest approach is the best one. The idea is I would just create these giant overhangs like this, have them connected here, and then I could create another run over on the side like that. I have mixed feelings of the way that you can see inside of here, but in some ways that's okay. You'd probably be distant looking at the trees anyways. Now, one tricky part with this design is how I want to interleave the edges here. One technique that I like that looks nice is just interleaving things like this. Just leaves me with an unfortunate block there, but I can cover that up with a regular platform and we're good to go. So let's just repeat that pattern in all four corners here and follow that up with sealing everything off with impermeable floors. All right, that looks pretty good. In retrospect, I probably could have made this even one floor higher. It would make it look not so cramped, but that's all right. At this point, I think we just need to finish it off. We're just going to keep on going up, and then I think just taper it as we go. Another thing on my mind is I'm tempted to put a monument at the top of this thing. And for this monument, I need to be mindful of the clearance because we are rapidly approaching the top of the map. I just want to see how far away I can get before it claims I'm too tall for these monuments. So let's just put in these random blocks here. We're not actually going to build this. Well, this is disappointing. So you'll notice that it says this cannot be built at this height. And even if I can't fit it in the shape, I can use it as an indicator of the height that I can build it in. So you can see as I move down this blocks, even if I were to build it right here, it's still too high. The last layer that I could build it at is here. I'd have to end the dam at this height if I wanted an Earth repopulator there. So that really, that's disappointing. That limits what I could do. I mean, that's basically this height right here. That's the highest the Earth repopulator could be built at. So I've got two choices here. I could either make this tower shorter with the idea of having Earth repopulator on it, or just not put the Earth repopulator on top. I think I'm going to go with that route. And as I was messing around with trying to figure out what to put there, I started to have some crazy ideas of what I could actually build up here. Just going like a completely unhinged build. I was thinking, nothing stops me from making some giant abomination like this overhanging everything else, and making a city park or something way the hell up here. The only thing that I can't do is I can't put dirt, which makes me sad, so I can't irrigate it. But it might be interesting to put some amenities up there and other things. But for now, I think I'm going to leave that for a future episode. I think there's only one other small change I'm going to make for now to this design, and that's to have a place for overflow. So the idea is eventually this entire building is going to be filled all the way to the brim, and when that happens, I don't want it just overflowing. And there's two ways I could address that. One is I could just seal it off with impermeable floors. The other way is I could have the water cascade out, and I think that's what I'm going to go for. And of course, I need to make sure that I don't leak through any of this part down here, so we'll just have to put a little bit of levees right there. Cap the ends off with some dams, and I think we'll go down here at the very tail end here and give dams here as well. Okay, that is the plan. This is kind of a crazy structure, and if things continue the way I'm planning, it's going to get crazier yet. I'm about ready to switch this over to a time lapse, but we do have a bad tide that's about to start. I do want to see what ends up happening with this bad tide, because this is the first one we've had for a while to see if some of our diversion systems work. So first thing I'm noticing, is this diversion system working? We haven't actually seen this one in action since I built it. Yeah, that looks like it's sending water down to the bottom of the map through a pipe. So that looks promising. And this one looks like it's working too. So this one is keeping our new dam nice and safe. I can see that water starting to flood down through the pipe as well. Well, bad tide is no problem, in which case I think it's time to switch to a time lapse. Let's see the rest of this tower built, and then we can make plans from there. With that, we should have a working tower. And I took the liberty of finishing our last run of Aqueduct here so that we can slowly work our way to turning and tearing all this down. But let's take a look at the tower here. This thing is looking nice and imposing. I like the way that's turned out. And I still think we've got room for some more construction up here, because you can see we've got a little bit of clearance left before we hit the top. But right now you'll notice this is still empty, and I think it's time to change that. So the reason it's empty is I have one of the sluice gates over here draining at 100%. And that's because I didn't want everything flooding as I was building it. But what we're going to do is we're going to go down to this sluice gate, or you can configure it for, say, 0.5 meter. And that's because we've got this dam here that I don't want draining our entire structure. This should very promptly close. And now if we look inside our dam, we're going to see it start to flood. Now, one of the things that I should do later on is connect this to multiple water sources. So this entire tower is going to be filled by the one water source at its base. As you see over here, we have this other end of the aqueduct connecting to these water sources. Long term, that's going to be a good play to have it connected to the tower too. And reaching our way station, I see it did turn everything green. That is just what I was looking for. And that's going to continue now much faster up the pillar and work its way into the final retaining pond. And my only worry as I see this fill up, I forget if 2 edges is going to be enough to handle all the CMS coming through this tower. We might actually still have flooding at the very top. And we'll find out very soon. If this starts overflowing despite having this waterfall here, we'll know we've got a problem. Well, so far seems okay. Except for this flooding down here. I'm hoping that's going to resolve itself once this starts moving. Do we have enough flow? Yeah, there we go. All right, there is our tower with our crazy looking scaffolding on top. With that taken care of, I would like to go back to this dam here and clean it up. Kind of messy right now and causing a little bit of flooding. But I think we've more or less decommissioned it at this point. Everything should be operational without it. All right, our giant water tower in there takes care of one of the things I wanted to resolve this episode. However, we still have the other one, which is getting enough pumped water so that we could start increasing our population. I think this tower now opens up some space to do that. Now, if I look at the map, I've reserved this section over here for being food production. But I'm thinking that somewhere around here would be a really good area to maybe pump additional water. So for this plan, I think I'm going to start over here. In fact, I think I'm going to lean into all this space I used to have here for that dam, as well as maybe relocating some of these existing warehouses we've got for space. And for this build, because it's a vertical playthrough, I'm going to try to stack our pumps one on top of each other, and then put a bunch of water towers above that. And you can see as I build this what I mean about trial and error. Rough idea of what I want this to be, but I'm just kind of playing with it as I go. So you can see there's a few steps forward, a few steps back, and eventually I end up with what I want. Combined, this should give us a nice big boost to the amount of water we're collecting and storing. And you can see what I've done is just trying to layer these pumps one on top of each other so I can interleave them. As I finish this, I think I'm going to try to make one minor adjustment so I can connect these two sides of the tower with tube ways. I think if I do something like this, I should be able to run tube ways connecting the two sides of the tower, and then just re-add those deep water pumps. And to cap it all off, I think I'll just put some roofs on the top for decorations, and then build some quick scaffolding so I can build it quickly. And with that, we can set them loose to build this monstrosity. A few days later, and we've got our finished pumping station. I think we can just get rid of this last bit of scaffolding that we don't need anymore, and that should look a lot nicer. And with that, I think we're at a good stopping point for this episode. You can't see this, but it took around 5 hours of recording for me. So we've got our new giant water tower in the center of the map, we cleaned up our old water dam, and we've got a nice new pumping station with lots of extra supply of water. Looking at next episode though, I think we've solved our food problem, we solved our water problem. It's time to start increasing our population, maybe starting to build more homes, and probably building a food factory. I'm also not finished with this water tower. I think there's some interesting stuff I could do at the top, with maybe building a city in the sky, which I think would be pretty fitting for the Skyborn. That said, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I hope to catch you next time.